The Sega Master System was launched in Japan on October 20th, 1985, meaning the system is close to celebrating 35 years of existence. To me, the Master System has always been a massively underrated console, featuring a great and varied library, but it's often overshadowed by its closest competitor, the NES. And that's a shame too, because there are so many great games and hidden gems in that system that I rarely see anyone talk about. Though part of it is due to the system's early death in North America, meaning gamers across the pond could only experience about half of the games we experience in Europe and South America. Even the hardware was very impressive for its time, often producing games that looked near 16-bit quality and could often pass for early Atari ST, Amiga 500 or even Sega Genesis games. So I think it's about time we highlight some of the best games the Sega Master System has to offer. But first, we need to establish some ground rules. The first rule is only one game per main franchise. This means if you see Sonic 2 on the list, you won't see Sonic 1 anywhere else. But you might see Sonic Spinball because it's a spin-off that plays differently from the rest of the series. The second rule is that I'll be more or less focusing on exclusives or games that I feel are better on the Master System, with the exception of the Game Gear, because these two systems share way too many games. Anyway, let's jump right to it. Number 30. Jurassic Park. Yes, I know, it's kind of weird starting with a movie-to-game adaptation, but hear me out. First of all, did you even know this game exists for the console? A lot of people tend to assume the Master System died in the late 80s or early 90s. But this game came out well during the middle of the 16-bit console wars. As for the game itself, this is a unique mix of action platformer, car combat, and I'm not sure how to describe the last one. Prince of Persia maybe? You play as Alan Grant and you're trying to escape the island. To achieve this, you can select which stage you want to tackle and they'll fall into one of three styles, keeping the gameplay varied. You have the vehicle stages, in which you control a tiny little car and use an aiming reticule to shoot down enemies coming at you, jump over rocks, and collect power-ups. You then have standard platformer levels where you go from left to right, trying to reach the end until you fight an end-level boss. Along the way, you'll pick up coins and health packs, and you can even pause the game to access an in-game menu to change weapons or use a health pack. And each time you complete a level, you even get a small cutscene. Finally, you have more intricate levels, which play like the regular left to right stages, but are instead much bigger and require you to have a good sense of direction, enter doors, memorize locations, that sort of thing. The graphics are generally pretty good, but I do feel the music could have been better. Overall, this is a pretty good movie-to-game adaptation, and I actually prefer this version over the Genesis one. Yes, I know, you can play as a raptor on the 16-bit version, but that game just never clicked with me. Number 29. Lord of the Sword. Lord of the Sword is a side-scrolling platformer in the vein of Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, or Castlevania 2. You can use a sword as well as a bow and arrow to defeat enemies. And you can travel to towns to talk to NPCs and learn where you need to go. The game world is also huge for the time, and it's very easy to get lost in. And as you complete certain levels, you attain weapon upgrades which make your life much easier. But make no mistake, this game is hard. and the lack of a password system does not help. But if you stick with it long enough, you'll find a long, difficult adventure that, in my opinion, is definitely worth experiencing. Number 28. Captain Silver. Captain Silver is a port of an arcade game, and a very fun one at that. You go from left to right, killing everything in your path, picking weapon power-ups which make you stronger, as well as gold, which can be used towards buying upgrades for your character. Levels can also have multiple paths, which are worth learning so as to better improve your character. And your upgrades range from better weapons to jumping higher, that sort of thing. Sprites are large and the background's colorful, but for the most part the graphics are pretty average. That is, until you reach a few levels with several layers of simulated parallax scrolling. The game is also compatible with FM audio, and I feel it's the best way to play it. I should also point out that the US version is missing roughly half of the levels found in the European and Japanese copies. So if you live in the US, you might want to import a PAL or Japanese copy instead. Number 27. Miracle Warriors. Miracle Warriors is one of the first JRPGs brought to the West and one of the earliest entries in the genre, with the original PC-88 port predating the first Final Fantasy by a year. For the most part, the game plays like your standard JRPG fare, but it's unique in a few points, namely how it tries to create this sort of pseudo 3D look as you explore towns and the world. So instead, you need to keep an eye out on the top right corner. You initially start out alone, but are eventually joined by 3 other characters. You're also expected to grind a lot and have a high encounter rate, as was customary at the time. But not all encounters are enemies. Some can be merchants which you can talk to. Though it is kind of funny when the game says you encounter an evil merchant. Ah yes, those merchants of evil, taking over the world with capitalism. Number 26. Danan the Jungle Fighter. Danan is an action platformer with some light RPG elements. You play as the titular Danan in a Conan the Barbarian type setting. Well, actually, it's more like your Hunter from the future, because we eventually start fighting Nazis in a futuristic setting. Ha! I love it when games, movies and comics do the whole caveman in a post-apocalyptic world thing. Anyway, the game will require you to jump, climb, defeat enemies, and pick up items and health upgrades along the way. All of these health upgrades are persistent, meaning they stay with you forever. So it's usually a good idea to check every branching path for an upgrade you might have missed. The game also runs really smoothly, and controlling Danan is pretty easy. There's even a bit of a story as you progress through each stage. My biggest issue with Danan is that the bosses are super difficult, and that you always have to use your dagger. Yes, the dagger can be upgraded to cause more damage, but it will always have this short reach. At least, this is one of those games where you can touch enemies and they won't hurt you unless they're doing a specific attack animation. So, it is pretty forgiving in that regard. Number 25. Spellcaster. Spellcaster might seem familiar to some of you, and that's because it's the prequel to Mystic Defender on the Sega Genesis. Except the prequel is actually better than the sequel. Spellcaster is an action platformer coupled with a visual novel / point-and-click adventure style gameplay. During the action segments, your controls are fairly basic as you can jump, shoot fireballs, or charge a fireball before shooting. You can also acquire spells and items which make you more powerful and help you along the way, though using those spells will consume energy. During the adventure segments, you'll talk to people, move between areas, and solve item or dialogue puzzles. Nothing too advanced, but it does keep the gameplay varied and interesting, while also giving you a plot to follow. The sequel on the Mega Drive doesn't have any of these adventure segments, and the gameplay is also very different. Now, I should point out both games are based on an anime called Spirit Warrior or Peacock King, which I've never watched, but would explain why the Master System and Sega Genesis games look similar in art style despite playing so differently. But regardless of whether or not you've watched the anime, you should definitely check out Spellcaster. Number 24. Renegade. Renegade is the granddaddy of the beat-em-up genre, the predecessor to Double Dragon, and the game most ZX Spectrum users are familiar with. In fact, the ZX Spectrum port was the first version of this game I've ever played. But man, this game is so much better on the Master System. Graphically, I love how bright and colorful it is. I mean, seriously, look at all the colors here. This is what the Master System did so well. It doesn't even look like an 8-bit game. You even get some nice parallax scrolling here and there. And just look at this. Look at the detail on the characters' faces during the cutscenes. The music is also really good and energetic, and the hit detection is just perfect. You don't have any weapon pickups like you do in Double Dragon, but you do get to punch your foes while they're down, knock them off motorcycles, fight while riding a motorcycle, and the game even throws 3 enemy AI characters against you at the same time. For comparison's sake, Double Dragon on the NES and Master System never had more than 2 enemies on screen at all times. I think Renegade's biggest flaw is that it's one player only, but it's a flaw I can easily forgive for such a fun beat-em-up. Number 23. Aztec Adventure. Aztec Adventure is a top-down action game where you control a small boy named Nino. Ha! A boy named Nino. I see what you did there. Anyway, he's looking for the Aztec treasures, but first needs to clear 10 Aztec mazes. Well, the game calls them mazes, but the levels are all pretty straightforward if you ask me. At the start of each level, you're given a target and you have to take down all of those enemies in the level to proceed. You initially start out with just your sword, but can get item pickups to help you progress. These can range from arrows, balls that shoot in all 4 directions, and the most famous item of them all, money, which can be used to bribe enemies to follow you and fight for you. It may not seem like it, but this feature was a pretty big deal back in the day. You can use your special weapons and they'll fire them just like you would. Each stage also has a level exclusive item to help you progress. So for example, in the first level you can get an item that will help you burn down vegetation that blocks your path, while in level 2 you get boots that let you walk over water, that sort of thing. The graphics are a bit basic, though the sprites are pretty large. And the game is also FM compatible, which in my opinion makes the music much better. With such unique gameplay style, this is one title you should definitely check out. Number 22. Fantasy Zone 2. Fantasy Zone is such an amazing game. You play as this cutesy ship shooting down cutesy enemies in some really cute and colorful backgrounds. And the sequel is more of the same, but this time with FM audio. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I was going to add Fantasy Zone 1 or 2 here, because both games play pretty much the same. You can travel back and forth between levels, defeating enemies will have them drop money where you can spend in stores, and some enemies will drop portals to different parts of the level or the aforementioned weapon shops. Both games are super addicting and super fun, but I think I'll give the nod to the sequel, because it has ever so slightly better graphics and you can choose between PSG or FM audio, so that's nice. Seriously though, if you've never played Fantasy Zone, I highly recommend it, either one of them. Number 21. Sonic Chaos. Oh boy, am I going to get some flack with this one. Okay, so I previously reviewed Sonic 1 and 2 for the Master System, and I generally didn't care too much for them. I thought the first one was okay, but I didn't really get the massive amounts of love this game gets. And as for Sonic 2, I just didn't care for that one. Sonic Chaos, on the other hand, I really like it. I feel Sonic Chaos fixes all of the issues I had with the previous games. First of all, the loop-de-loops are back, and I feel it places more emphasis on speed, which I like. It's also the first 8-bit game where you can play as either Sonic or Tails, and they both have different abilities. Sonic can do a running dash, which is good, but not overly useful, while Tails can fly, and yes, this is very useful. The best part though are the power-ups. Generally speaking, Sonic 1 and 2 had really boring power-ups. And I'm not even talking about the 8-bit games here. Like, even the Mega Drive games had boring power-ups, with the exception of Sonic 3. And even then, the power-ups were only interesting when you played as Sonic. Sonic Chaos, on the other hand, gives you some really awesome stuff, like spring boots and rocket shoes. And you have enemies with springs on their backs. Sure, it doesn't make sense from a lore standpoint, but who cares? Seriously, why did they not put these on other Sonic games? I think my biggest issue with this game is how short and easy it is. You can probably finish it on your first try with little difficulty. That and the frame rate being a little inconsistent. But seriously, for my money, this is the best Sonic game on the Master System. And I say, go check it out. Number 20. Psycho Fox. Psycho Fox is more or less part of the same series as Kid Cool for the NES and Decap Attack for the Sega Genesis. I mean, they're not really the same series, but they were made by the same developer, and the gameplay for each game is more or less an evolution on its predecessor. Anyway, in Psycho Fox, you start with the titular fox before eventually controlling its friends as well. In the game, you can break eggs to find helpful items, the most useful of which is the bird, which serves as a secondary weapon as well as an extra hit point. You also get an item which lets you switch between characters, all of which play differently. Psycho Fox, for example, has average speed and jumping, while the hippo has a smaller jump but can destroy certain blocks to open new, alternate paths. The monkey is slow but jumps higher, reaching platforms the other characters can't, while the tiger is the fastest character and can skip over water. And the game is all about precision platforming, getting used to the physics, and knowing when to use each character. You even have a mini game at the end of each level, which is kinda cool. Psycho Fox is considered a Master System classic, and with good reason. If you can, I say go check it out. Number 19. Psychic World. Oh man, I love Psychic World. This was one of those games that drove me to create my channel, as I feel it's an amazing game that I never see anyone mention. I even sent an extra copy to Implant Games once so he could review it, and he did an awesome job at it. Anyway, in Psychic World, you control Lucia, who is out to rescue her sister who was kidnapped by a monster. Luckily, you were given an ESP helmet, which lets you use several skills to your advantage. At first, you only have your regular shot, but quickly gain abilities like healing, teleporting to the beginning of the stage in case you get stuck, and the shield, which is easily the most overpowered ability, as it can protect you from almost everything. As you clear stages, you'll also gain new attacks like the fire, ice, and sonic shots. The ice and fire shots can be used to build or melt ice platforms respectively to help you progress, and each weapon in the game can be upgraded multiple times. More importantly, all of your weapons and abilities can be used anytime you want. You only need enough ESP to use them and access them using the menu on the lower left corner. Not only that, but the levels are gigantic, with lots of paths and challenges that make them very fun to explore. The music is also pretty good, though I do feel the game is a bit too short and easy for its own good, and the graphics aren't too great for the system. I mean, it basically looks like an NES game. This isn't an attack on the NES though, it's just that I expect the game to look better. In fact, the colors should have looked like its Game Gear port. The game is getting a bit hard to find, not due to its price, but rather because there aren't too many copies online. But if you can, be sure to grab a copy. Number 18. Master of Darkness. Master of Darkness is often treated as a Castlevania clone for the Master System. And, well, yeah, it kind of is. But that doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, quite the opposite. This game is awesome. The controls feel just as responsive as an 8-bit Castlevania, except this time you have some control over your jumps. The graphics are also much better on a technical level, featuring larger sprites, more colors, and even simple things like water animations, which I felt were missing from the NES Castlevanias. I also feel some levels do a better job at being creepy, like the House of Wax Dolls, which actually frightened me the first time I played it as a kid. With that said, the music, art style, and setting are not as interesting as Konami's classic franchise. The sub-weapons are mostly inspired by Castlevania, like how the bomb functions similar to the axe in Castlevania, or the boomerang, which works a lot like a slower cross. Overall, I feel this is a great Master System game. Gameplay-wise, I'd say it's on the level of the original Castlevania. And while the music, art style, and level design aren't on the same level as Konami's whip-wielding classic, it's still very much worth a playthrough. Number 17. Gove Elias. Just like how Master of Darkness is accused of being a Castlevania ripoff, Gove Elias is often accused of being a Legend of Zelda clone. But while I agree with the first one, I do think the latter is a bit of a disservice. Yes, Gove Elias is clearly inspired by The Legend of Zelda, but it's also clearly doing its own thing. For starters, the game is a lot more combat focused, as you often need to farm enemies to get enough gold to buy health and weapon upgrades, as well as items that help you progress. You won't find many puzzles here either. Instead, it's more about destroying the right rock, or clearing a screen of enemies to open an entrance to a helpful NPC or dungeon. Every item or power-up you get is also automatically equipped for you, so you don't need to enter a menu to change them. Instead, the item menu is more about telling you what you've already picked up and how much gold you have. When inside a dungeon, the game will then change to one of two modes. The first is an action side-scroller where you defeat enemies, mid-bosses, and do some light platforming before eventually facing the dungeon boss. And the second is kind of like a shmup, except you can only kill enemies in close proximity with your sword, before you once again fight a boss at the end. I feel this game gets overlooked too often, but if you want to try an interesting variation on the classic Zelda formula, look no further than Gove Elias. Number 16. Asterix and the Secret Mission. If you grew up in Europe, you're likely familiar with the Asterix comic book characters, and the Master System Asterix games are pretty great. The 16-bit incarnations, not so much. It was a hard time having to pick between the original Asterix or Asterix and the Secret Mission. There's also a third game called Asterix and the Great Rescue, but this was done by a different developer, and it's not as good. But between the original and the Secret Mission, I have to give the nod to the Secret Mission. They mostly play the same, with tight platforming, punching as your main form of attack, and you can even jump and punch down to take enemies out in a Super Mario fashion. You can also break blocks to progress further, and vases which reveal helpful items. In both games, you can also pick between Asterix and Obelix, with the two having different abilities to better suit your playstyle. With all of this said, I prefer the Secret Mission over the first game because it does away with the potion mechanic from the first game, which was a horrible projectile weapon that was often required to progress. I also feel the levels and level design are more interesting in the sequel, and that the music and graphics got a pretty nice upgrade. Especially the graphics. I mean, look at how detailed the backgrounds and sprites are on this level. This is some really impressive stuff for an 8-bit system. With that said, you can't go wrong with either game. Just be sure to stay away from Asterix and the Great Rescue. And that's it for part 1 of my personal top 30 Sega Master System games. Now please remember that this is my personal list and will most likely be very different from yours. Part 2 will be launching very soon, but in the meantime, I'd love to hear what are your favorite Master System games. Are there any games you feel like I'm forgetting? What are your personal hidden gems on the Sega Master System? Let me know in the comments. Hey everyone, thank you for watching Stika's Retro Corner. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. All that fun social media stuff. And if you want to support the channel, check out my Patreon, where you can find all kinds of awesome rewards. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. Bye!